People who have walked out of a job in the middle of the day. What was the last straw? My first job was as a cart pusher at Walmart. I was a teenager and believed that if I worked hard, they'd promote me and move me to a job inside. I showed up every day and worked my ass off. After about 3 months they promoted a guy who had started after me who was known to be a slacker. When I asked the manager why I didn't get moved inside first, he said, "You're the only one who's dependable out there." It took a while to let that sink in, but once it did, I went back and told him I quit and handed in my badge. He said, "If you just walk out with no notice, they'll never hire you back." I just laughed and told him that was fine by me. Coffee shop barista. Small neighborhood shop. The kind where I would have your drink ready for a regular ready to go before they even got to the counter. Owners wanted to move, so they sold the shop to a completely clueless Stouchenizel that used his wife's retirement to fund his dream of owning his own business. The man couldn't tell you the difference between latte and a mocha if his life depended on it. Probably would have smelled a bag of rabbit poop if I told him it was coffee beans. During a particularly busy morning, I suggested that boss man move his personal belongings from the largest table in our space. After watching 3 large groups enter the shop, see there were no tables available, and leave, boss man freaked the duck out on me, telling me that I have no idea how to run a coffee business, and to never tell him what to do. This was on the floor, in front of the full house. I said nothing, just turned to get my coat, and left. He went out of business very shortly after. I was working at a beer warehouse that did its own recycling, meaning I had to dump a bunch of empties into a giant can crusher. It was wet. It was dirty. It smelled awful. But the worst part was that people would often throw out used needles with their empties. We had protective gloves to protect us, but they were crap and only used to cover the companies as in case something happened. I had a couple of near misses with needles but never actually got pricked. Until one day when inevitable happened and I pricked myself pretty bad on a needle. It went straight through the gloves like it was nothing and was literally hanging in me. I told my manager and he said to get back to work and it wasn't a big deal. He even denied me taking the rest of the day off so I could get it checked out. So I told him to shove it and just left. Boss at the time was a screamer. Couldn't do anything right. And I was a ground man for earth movers, excavators and the like. I was busy working away smashing concrete. He comes cruising by in an excavator, tink, 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 and for some reason shouts to me, "If you don't want to be here you can leave." Maybe I had a salty look on my face. Maybe he's just a twat. But I thought about what he said for 10 minutes or so. Dropped my tools on the ground, walked to my truck and drove away. Never looked back and never heard from them besides my final check. Duck you clag. I was working in a tire shop at the time. A guy that I had trained got promoted above me because reasons. So one day I'm changing tires and he starts screaming at me telling me I'm doing this and that the wrong way. I'm like, first of all, no. Second, I taught you how to do this. So don't go trying to tell me how to do it. He grabbed me by the shoulder and spun me around so he could yell in my face. He's nose to nose with me, poking me in the chest, telling me I'm ducking lazy. I'm a piece of shit. I'm this. I'm that. Act. I still had a tire bar in my hand and I started seeing red. I had the sense to know that either I walk out of here right now and I'm out of a job, or I brain this Stouchenizel with a tire bar, and then I'm out of a job and I go to jail. I pushed him off of me and dropped the tire bar. Walked up front and handed my manager my fob for the time clock and my tool pouch. Gave old dude a "go duck yourself" on my way out the door. Ike. I had already given in my notice a few days prior. Had a new job lined up. The big box retailer I worked for at the time put me on all-day greeting duty and the managers started being big digs, not letting me go to the toilet, etc. So, after the 3rd day I just walked away, got my stuff and left. It was my shift manager. I liked the job, but good god, that manager was something else. Incredibly nitpicky. controlling, and very prone to panic. It just got to be more than I could handle, and so I called the store manager on the phone. Told her I couldn't take working with this woman anymore. And asked if she would like me to stay until someone else came in to take over for me. She declined my offer and told me to just go. This shift manager was there for about 6 years and upwards of 20 people quit because of her for the same reasons I had. Was working as a butcher at a high-end shop. Specialty sausages. All natural meats. Exotic deli section. Stuff like that. On top of the usual shitty parts of working as a butcher, hard work, low pay, itchy customers, weird hours, the place never had their equipment serviced, never had their knives sharpened, sold frozen hormone-fed crap meat as all natural complete with all natural price, recycled expired, and by expired I mean green meat into their hot bar food. Forced the butcher staff to work in the deli, which led to customer complaints from the blood all over our arms and aprons. This job paid just .50 over minimum wage. One Sunday the owner came back into the cutting room and started berating me for cutting new steaks to replace some old ones in the case that were obviously not going to sell as they were starting to get kinda crusty. He screamed in Polish until he was red in the face. Threw his hat on the bloody ground and stormed out. I waited until it got really busy. Told him to go duck himself. And left. Not midday. But mid-shift. New Year's Eve. I'm a cook. Management assures us. Kitchen closed at 7. As fast as you can clean up. GTFO. Decent deal. Hostess. At 720 is still letting people in the door. I'm down to me and 2 other people. We just drew the short straws. We're at the point where dishes alone we're going to be several hours. My GF and I had tickets for a gala. And she's literally waiting in the car. I say to the hostess, you need to roll up your sleeves and get doing some dishes. Cause I don't want to be here because you didn't know enough to close the doors. Twice I ask. 8 PM. She let another table in. I took off my apron. Handed it to the dude. Apologized to him. And said this is stupid. Tickets were worth more than the job. Clearly, I felt bad for the kitchen staff. But WTF. I'm glad the hostess had nowhere to go. I worked at a cell phone plant where we would box up phones and send them to stores. I worked from noon to midnight Monday through Friday. With mandatory overtime on Saturdays if they wanted it. Well, for a few weeks we had been working Saturdays and everyone was stressed. The next Friday rolls around. And they tell us the entire day that we aren't working Saturday. An hour before we leave they say they've changed their mind. I was mad. Had words with the manager. And just left. I was young. And still living with family. So it wasn't the end of the world to lose my job. But still sucked. After being ill for over a decade, when I went job hunting I found that employers looked at my CV and just ignored me. I had applied for 2 months to every IT job available. So I decided to volunteer at a charity shop to show willing and get some experience. My manager at first seemed nice but very short-staffed. So before I knew it I was doing 6 days a week 9 to 5 and always on the shop floor serving customers. She would sit upstairs sifting through donations and taking the best items home to sell on eBay. She kept the profits as the items never appeared in the books. When I asked her about this she complained about her wages. Then after a series of shoplifting incidents she told me she expected me to restrain and stop all suspected shoplifters. I told her no I wouldn't, as the Eastern Europeans doing the stealing worked in groups and I could get hurt. The final straw was when I finally got a job interview after 4 months of volunteering. I asked her if she would be a reference as I had no other job experience and she said she didn't know me well enough and I wasn't dependable. My paycheck was 2 weeks late. And the one due that day wasn't in either. The 2 other people in my department walked out as well. We eventually got paid, but if the money isn't showing up and there's no communication as to why or when, get out. I worked for a contractor. I had only been there for 2 months, but anytime I showed initiative I would get shot down or given the runaround. It was the worst. Eventually I found a new job that started the following Monday. I was planning to quit Thursday and get a long weekend. But the boss came to my office on Tuesday morning and told me I had to do this for a big job the company was bidding for. I listened to his spiel and said that's great, except I quit. Right now. Beat decision I have made in my professional life. Was working at Domino's. Everyone who has done fast food knows that closing shift sucks ass. I like to be the person who volunteered for it if people called in sick. But hated it when lazy asses refused to do it. I came to work. Manager said we need you to close tonight. Everybody else who had not closed recently or were standing around to hear what I would say. It was the 4th emergency call in a row that week. I said no. Turned around and left. They didn't even try to call me after. Edit. Also, I got next week's schedule the same day. I was scheduled for all closing. I used to manage a popular fast food restaurant, where quality is most definitely our recipe. We went through 2 general managers in a month. And the new one scheduled me short closes. I need 5. Was scheduled 3. And the remaining 3 didn't show up. They had a track record of blowing off work. I called everyone on my store's payroll. Called the other 2 nearby stores. Got nobody. Finally, in a desperate attempt, I called the district manager and asked for help. Got none from them. I ran the store by myself that night. Closed it all. Ended up leaving at 7 AM. 6 hours later than closers are supposed to leave. I left my keys and a note saying I'd never be back. I worked in a pawn shop and things were going well for a couple of years until we got stuck with a new manager who not very good at the job. Guy walks in and wants $200 on PRS guitar. These typically hold their value and go for far more than that. I informed him that I could loan him quite a bit more if needed it and thanked me, but told me he didn't want to let it go and would be back in week. Right then the manager walks in and goes, "Let me see that," lucks the guitar all over to give the impression that he knew what he was doing and said, "I'll give you $50. Guy obviously gets upset. He says it doesn't matter what they offered, I run things here. After he left we stepped in the back and got into a screaming match over why that was so wrong, and I walked right out. A girl not turning up for her shift. Me stacking all her bread. Getting halfway through mine and then a little scrote telling me I was lazy because I was behind. I took some bread too. Back in college I used to work for a call center and they implemented you have to ask for permission to go to the bathroom. Lol, what am I 8? Went to the bathroom without asking and they tried to grill me and I just left. Boss got his finger up in my face lecturing me in front of customers. He thought he was being funny. But I slammed the stack of plates down on the table and just walked out the front door. His mom, the boss of the cafe, started to cry cause this was in the middle of lunch rush and she'd be on her own. Should have raised a better man and she wouldn't have had that problem. I took a second job just to make a cushion until my wife was able to go back to work. We had just had our second child. I was already a manager at a fast food place. And I took another job at a little diner downtown. I cooked a little. Did dishes. Just a few different things, never really had a spot. Well, one day one of the kitchen crew calls in and I was put in their spot. We were doing good until my wife calls me. Our newborn was running a fever. I asked the manager at the time if I could clock out and go get my wife. She was gonna drop me back off and take the baby to the doctor herself. The whole thing would have taken maybe 45 minutes. In the middle of the afternoon and we weren't busy. The manager said no. So I asked for a smoke break which she granted and just left. We didn't necessarily need the income from my second job. I work as a window tinter. I had worked for this place for a year. I went into the office and asked about my vacation after a year of working. They told me I had to work a whole calendar year. I started in February so I would have to work another almost full year for my vacation. A few days later I had a work order for a full tint. After install I pulled it out front, the manager then came back and told me to pull it back around for a sun strip on the windshield. I completed the sun strip and pulled it back around. He came back and told me to pull it back around again to tint the tail lights. expressing angrily that I should read the work order. Of course I had, and there was no order for either the brow or tail lights. After I pulled the car back around and tinted one tail light before it was time for my lunch break, the manager told me I couldn't have lunch until I finished the car. I told him to suck my big dick and walked out. That was the day I started my company : I worked in daycare at a private school. Showed up to work on time. Started my morning routine with the kids per usual, but got a random phone call an hour into my day. I got someone to watch over my class and stepped aside into the restroom to answer, and it turned out to be my boss. "Why aren't you at work?" "I am." "Oh. Well. Why are you answering the phone?" "Because I'm expecting a call from my doctor." "Just get back to work." I continued on with my day until it was nap time for the kids, when my boss pulled me aside and told me I was being fired for answering my phone during working hours and was asked to finish up my day. Yay, right. Luckily, the other women I worked with said they would help cover my class after I left. My only regret was not being able to say goodbye to my class. Last I heard, my old boss got the tip of her pinky finger chopped off from the giant paper cutter we used for crafts, so yay. Applied at a local Best Buy. Got hired, and the onboarding process involved no manager involvement at all. They sent me to the back and had me watch training videos for 2 days straight. I had to ask employees who weren't managers what I needed to do next because the managers were too busy to be bothered. Third day I showed up and they tried to send me to the back for more training videos, and an hour in I got off the computer, walked into HR and handed them the blue shirt because, surprise, the manager was nowhere to be found. Promoted to supervisor after 2 months. Never got my raise. Took them 2 additional months to get me an email address. 2 months after that my team didn't hit goal. And they told me weeks later, the day prior to commissions being paid out, that if the team didn't hit goal the managers forfeit their entire commission. They never did give me the raise. Walked the next day. I was a on-site at tech. Entry level. All I could fix was basic stuff. I knew nothing about servers or networking. We contracted that out. So when an alarm in the server room went off, I called the network tech on call. I did what I was supposed to. What ideas instructed to do. My boss decided to call me and ditch me out on the phone. For doing my job. I stood up. Took the elevator to the 9th floor and tossed my keys on the CS desk and left. My boss was a big dick. The hours were long, 12 hours a day, and the pay was shitty. But what broke the camel's back was when he made the breaks 3 hours apart, instead of 2, and 5 minutes shorter. We all busted our asses and didn't deserve it. He tried to get me to sign a paper to agree with the changes, but I just walked off without saying anything. Creepo manager who was stealing money from the safe, and I knew about it and no one believed me, and harassing me, and who basically stole my promotion when he waltzed into the job because he knew the top manager wanted to have a sit-down meeting because of the obvious hostility I had towards him. He told me my attitude needed to change, and I said that would never happen because of the above reasons. He got really angry and started screaming at me really close to my face. Then got up and walked out of the office, slamming the door behind him. I left right then and there. After the fact. A couple months down the line, Creepo was fired and banned from the store for incidents similar to above, and I was apologized to and offered another position within the company. I was excluded from a photo shoot with an award that was won based on mostly my work the prior year. People from other departments were included in that photo because the company was trying to woo a new client with the promise we had 4 times the active staff we actually did to do their work. Why was I excluded? Oh. It would be too difficult to explain why I wasn't around to do the work because I'd handed in my notice due to moving to somewhere commuting to and from work was more of a nightmare than expected. But it was okay for all those other people who wouldn't be around to do the work to be in the picture to pad numbers. Went to lunch. Never went back. Despite frantic calls from my department line manager. Emailed the proper manager later saying I wouldn't be finishing my notice period because of it. Got paid anyway. Full stop. Worked at a certain orange home improvement store as a cashier. and had finished ringing up 2 men who continued to loiter beside me while I was cashiering. Once I was alone and didn't have a line of customers. One of the men said to me, "I'd love to take you to a party and get you so ducked up that you wouldn't even be able to remember what happened to you." I used my radio to call a manager to the front for help. The manager arrived, recognized the men, and got into a laughing, joking conversation with them. When they finally left, in a white van with no windows, I shit you not, my manager took me to the side and asked me what happened. I explained the situation, and she responded by stating, "You just need to get a thicker skin, sweetie." Same store. About a week prior to that incident, I had had the worst period ever and bled through my clothes, and repeatedly begged my manager to go to the bathroom. I was then told that I'd have to tell her exactly why I needed to go to the bathroom, and what kind of emergency I was having. Ended up having to use my lunch break to drive to Walmart to buy pants and underwear. Nightmare, 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 nightmare.